Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar today. It'll be a joint presentation between Argano and SAP, unlocking the retail value through connected supply chain planning, logistics, in order to drive a sustainable solutions. As we go through this today, our agenda here, just I'll go briefly through some housekeeping topics, and then we'll get more into a panel discussion. So I'll introduce the panelists shortly, and then we will deep dive into the topic of today around connected supply chains and sustainability, and then in that with some Q&A. As we go through this, I know that there's probably going to be a lot of questions from the audience or for the panelists here, so we certainly want to hear from you guys. There is the ability to submit questions on the right side of the screen. So as we go through this and talk through the different talking points and areas around connected supply chain and sustainability, we certainly want you to ask questions and make this as interactive as possible. So feel free to throw those out there, and I will field those questions and throw those back to our panelists as we go through this. So without further ado, want to introduce the folks who will be leading the discussion today. Real quick introduction about myself, and then I'll hand it off. So Scott Eisenberg, I am a principal with Argano. My background is about 25 years of SAP supply chain experience. Started way back in the late 90s doing ECC and APO solutions for supply chain planning, and have throughout my career been in this space. So seen a lot of industries, a lot of different challenges over the years, and specifically quite a few in the retail and apparel footwear solutions. So looking forward to the dialogue today. Also want to introduce Praful, if you want to do a quick introduction.
Hi, my name is Praful Karanth. I'm at SAP as a executive advisor focusing on the retail vertical and really supply chain. I've been with SAP for about 6 years and really started my career in the late 80s and just got into supply chain, working in the industry, did a lot of work around Six Sigma, Black Belt, Lean, and fell into supply chain. So spent a number of years in warehouse distribution, transportation, so really planning and logistics, both from store planning to broader supply chain planning to sales and operations planning. So, and have been really afforded the luxury of speaking with so many of our retail customers, to kind of getting some great insights on what they're doing well, where there are challenges, and hopefully we can bring some of that out at this webinar. So thanks for having me, Scott.
Thanks, Praful. Robin?
Thanks, Scott. Great to be here. My name's Robin Barrett-Wilson. I'm the executive advisor for SAP. Praful and I are colleagues, and I focus on the fashion part of the retail vertical. I've been in the industry since the late 90s. I have a fashion degree, a business degree. I ran stores for Victoria's Secret out of college. I was a buyer for Macy's. I worked for VF Corporation and was a vendor representative and had the JCPenney account. Spent about 15 or so years in technology, working with lots of fashion brands over those years, everything from sales to consulting. And then in 2015, I decided to follow that dream that I had when I was in college, and I opened my own women's clothing brand. And so from 2015 to 2019, I had a few stores and an online business, and I designed a line of clothing out of New York City. And unfortunately didn't quite work out the way I hoped, but I had great experience that I was able to take to this role, and I started at SAP in 2019. So just like Praful, talk with a lot of fashion retailers and fashion brands out there about what they're thinking about when it comes to meeting the customer needs and how it connects with the supply chain. So excited to have a conversation.
I didn't realize you were at Victoria's Secret's limited brands. I spent a number of years there as well, so we should chat on that on side topic.
Yeah, and who's been in the business, we all seem to have jumped, had a little stint at one of those places. So
Absolutely. Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for the introduction. So today's topic, unlocking retail business value through connected supply chain planning, logistics, in order to drive a solution. Obviously, that's a mouthful. I had a hard time getting that out. So it really hits on some of the key drivers that companies and consumers are focused on. Those four fundamental areas, have to work in unison to maximize, the consumer experience, drive efficiencies within organizations. And I think that's really why we're going to dive into the planning, logistics, and sustainability today. So, kind of wanted to start off, Robin, with the topic around, what is connected and talking through that and from your perspective and what are we seeing in the market?
Yeah, so connected, it seems like a basic word, but it really isn't. Organizations today are really looking to be connected to their consumer and have a great customer experience. And so you might be shaking your head and say, okay, what does that mean for supply chain? But really, fundamentally, if the product isn't at the right place at the right time and the right price, it's a bad customer experience. And so that connectivity, so everybody within an organization has the connection to the customer, having one view of the business, one view of inventory, one view of the customer, one view of product, so that they're able to really plan and really stay connected to what that customer is looking for. Being able to take it one step further and personalize, whether it's personalizing a product or a service, or actually personalizing the experience. All those things are really important when it comes to being connected. And there are some really great retailers and brands out there that are doing a really great job with this. But all in all, there are quite a few that are still struggling, trying to break down those silos and really trying to get, everybody kind of walking the same walk and talking the same talk and bringing it all together so that, they are effective. I think COVID really brought out that brand loyalty can be a bit fleeting. And as we know, if something wasn't on the shelf, somebody bought another brand that then became their favorite. So if you're not connected with your customer and if you're not connecting your supply chain to what the customer's looking for, you're going to lose out. And so that's really what what we're thinking about when it comes to connected.
So it's easier said than done and just say connected, but there's obvious challenges with connecting all the pieces here to make it seamless for the consumer. Are there any specific challenges or considerations that arise when trying to implement a connected supply chain solution that you've seen? Praful, and then opening it up to you as well. I know, just from experience and being able to connect the dots, sure, you might have one leg of, from your life cycle, your product life cycle to your planning, but then being able to deliver that on time has always been a challenge. What are some of the challenges of really enabling a fully connected supply chain?
Yeah, I think, Scott, when I think of connected, what Robin talked about to the customer, and retailers, that is the focus, right? What's happening in the store, the store associates, the consumers, you have to be connected. I think of connected on the other side as well. And when I first heard the word connected, it's not integrated. Integrated is a solution, is a technology that makes it happen. Connected doesn't mean email exchanges, doesn't mean, it means that as something happens, either on the demand side, the suppliers, if they're true partners, they should get visibility to that. And because we work in a very, our supply chain or our demand chain, everything is outside our control. Suppliers now really not just supply us products, but they provide services directly sometimes to the consumer. So when you think if it's not connected, what suppliers do is they don't get visibility to what spikes in demands are happening all over the place. They don't get notified of until a purchase order is cut. They don't get to see the retailer's demand plans that they've created, what kind of allocations they're going to have, assortments they're going to carry. And if you don't have it connected, means I don't know what you need. And if I'm not a dedicated contract manufacturer, guess what? I'm going to buy raw materials and you may not get what you want. right, to make the demand. If you and I are connected, then I know that I'm going to reserve and plan my production based on your demand. So I'm not making too much too early, but you're not promising your consumers and not getting that product. And that's just one example of a supplier that makes your product. It could also be your trading partners, the people that are bringing your product from Asia here. If I don't see visibility to where they are and how quickly we can move the ship around and get it to you, you will never react, and a supplier, in this case, the third-party provider, will never know. So connected just means you're in unison, you're very tight. What happens in one will impact the other, and so you treat your suppliers as good as your customers, because at the end of the day, if that doesn't happen, yes, the consumer experience is impacted.
I mean, speed and convenience are paramount, right? You mentioned that kind of going into this, that being able to have agility and resilience as well are very, very critical here. So do you have any insights on what, some of the retailers are doing, innovative things around their supply chain to enable the connectivity?
Yeah, so there are a couple, without naming names, but I work with a pretty large home improvement retailer. They've started servicing different parts of their business. People like you and I that, want to do it ourselves, call them DIY customers. And then you have customers that are contractors, right? That'll come to your store to buy for big projects. And typically that has been the smallest chunk of customers, but the highest source of revenue because they're buying in quantity. And one of the supply chain changes this company is doing, and they're not alone, there are other customers as well, is they're creating a separate parallel supply chain where, in this case, they're creating a fulfillment center where the contract can drive through in their pickup trucks and pick up products like they're driving through a store. And it's all means, how do I get my contractor to get all the products he wants, but doesn't waste time at the store picking that up, right? Sure. There are other ways that people are creating pop-up stores, right? And pop-up stores is for convenience and speed for the consumer, but that changes what the supply chains have to plan for now. Inventory at the store, inventory at these kiosks, inventory at cross docks that are close to the consumers. So it changes the channels and the number of ways that they have to manage inventory. And so Robin talked about one view of inventory. If you have that, if you know where your inventory is anywhere, you can really service the consumer anywhere. Because if you move product closer in a pop-up store environment or a kiosk or a pickup center, then you can manage that inventory. And that falls on the supply chain to make sure that the products are there for them to do. So there's a couple of innovative ways that everyone's doing it, but supply chain bears the burden because they have to make the product available.
Well, I mean, convenience is, again, paramount for everybody, especially coming out of COVID and being able to have this, buy online, pick up in store, or even returns, right? The reverse side of it. I might buy something online, but I don't have to take it to UPS, but I could drop it off at, one of the retail stores, and having the agility to manage that and making that connectivity is paramount as well. Personally, there's nothing more, you mentioned the DIYer. I'm in the middle of renovation right now and always looking online at a couple websites to see if they have what I'm looking for online. And there's nothing more frustrating to get confirmation that it's available. And I go to the store that day to get it and, it's out of stock or they can't find it. So very, very frustrating.
Absolutely. That's the worst experience somebody can have.
I also have to say, within fashion, they're doing some great things. We have some clients that are coming together with their apps, which are definitely things that, an app is, retailers have to really think long and hard about whether or not they want to develop an app, because downloading apps are not always the first and foremost on people's mind, and adding another app to their phone. But we have quite a few, I'm thinking of one retailer in particular who does a really, really great job of, when they're in the store, if you're looking for something and, perhaps you're not ready to talk to a sales associate and you're just looking for yourself, you're able to pull up their app and actually find the item within the store. And then, then you're armed with some great information and you're able to go to the sales associate and say, here's an item I'm looking for. I don't see, my size on the rack. I know you've got it in the store here. Can you help me find it? And 9 times out of 10, it's, it might be in the back room and it just hasn't been restocked, or it's in a fitting room. But again, that real-time inventory and being able to, as you mentioned, that convenience, connecting, making sure that customer experience is frictionless is key to the success. And these are really hard things to do. Having that view of inventory is not an easy task, especially when you're moving into the planning stage and you want to know, where's your inventory? Where should you be placing your inventory? Do you want to fulfill mostly out of your stores and just have one warehouse, or do you have multiple warehouses? And logistically, what's the most profitable way to ship an item or have a customer go in and pick up an item? All of those things are things that need to be taken into consideration as you go through the supply chain and think about how you connect the customer to what's going on within the rest of the organization.
That's a good segue, kind of into our next topic, which is around the planning aspect of that. And kind of wanted to jump into that piece of it because that's a part that's near and dear to my heart, as I've spent a majority of the time in the planning space. Parafal, I think, wanted to hand that off to you and just talk through a little bit of what we're seeing in the retail and fashion around the planning aspect of this, and what challenges are being addressed. And we've seen a big shift since COVID, obviously, in consumer behavior. So what's the impact of planning, and what are the things that are customers doing now with planning to be able to react to this?
Yeah, I think, like planning, I've always talked about, there was a famous military adage called prior planning prevents piss poor performance, right? Which is true. And, we talk about consumer experience, and all that intent is based on being prepared, right? And being prepared to make that not just the promise at any cost, but do it profitably. And we have a customer in the consumer electronics that very much like fashion, they work with very short life cycles, right? If a product is not there when it is, by the time you get to optimize your margin, it's either going to be not end of life, but the margins start degrading. And they have essentially gone through a very, everything is connected to their suppliers, very collaborative. Everybody has insight into what's selling, what needs, what plans are done. When they have a sales and operations planning, which is the kind of the ultimate goal of a retailer, is to get buy-in from all stakeholders. Suppliers sit alongside them and agree and a consensus that this is what we will produce to, and that's a promise, versus kind of handing it over the wall and giving them make this. Well, all that is really why, because you want the product in here on time, so it's available during product launch, it's available when the customers want it, and if once it's in your system, you bring it to where the consumer wants it. So a lot of effort, and we've been around, I think, collectively probably 80 to 90 years. CPFR, the collaborative planning, forecasting, and replenishment, was a concept in, I think, in the 80s. It's still very applicable today. We've got technology that allows, real-time transparency and visibility and knowing that. And in very few in retail, but some industries do it better than others, is they really tie their supply chain not just to their supplier, but the supplier's supplier, right? If I'm going to come out with a new console, chips have been big shortages for the last 2 or 3 years. They're coming out of it. So you really need to get enough chips to make products. It's one thing to promise a customer and then find out that you didn't have enough allocation of chips, right? And we saw what happened the last 2 years. Is you want to be able to know what's the production schedule of that fabrication plant. Are they going to be shut down during the, if you're going to spike demand during Chinese New Year, well, Chinese New Year is coming up, so you better plan the production for the supplier. It's not something that impacts the retailer until there's a delay. And so they really need to plan end to end, and everybody becomes equally a stakeholder to the successful delivery of products that they plan for. We're all influenced by social media, and so are retail demands being influenced by social media. It shouldn't be held between the merchant and what's happening. It should be clearly laid out in terms of if it's sustainability and this is the kind of products. Well, we need to let the suppliers be aware of that, because then they have to purchase raw materials. So I couldn't tell you, it's one of the most overlooked in my mind areas. Everybody says they do planning, nobody says they don't. But it's really, when you get down to the details, how connected is that planning end to end, and how quickly and transparent and visible do merchants have, do supply chain people do in an organization, that nobody's, flying something back from Shanghai because I missed the,
Sure, yeah,
cost to it. So if you do this right, you can not only be, we talk about sustainability, but you can do this not at an expense, at a major expense.
and certainly, shortening lead times, right, on your product life cycle, and being able to get product and having agility is directly correlated to the connected piece of it, right? So as you're getting, more recent and relevant consumer sentiment and demand, and being able to see that, being able to react sooner and quicker, right, is very important. So that definitely changes some of the priorities of where you're planning your supply chain too. And to your point,
yeah, and I'm at a conference right now where one of our partners actually, I got a demo. Well, it's amazing that they can tell you that the lead time in January, February, March is, the transit time is about 10 days longer than April, September, October, because of trade winds that run across the channel between US and Asia. If I can have that information, I can plan for shorter lead times in 1 month. Now that's intelligence that we've never had. And so if you totally make it open and visible, and you provide all these intelligent factors, you don't have to overrun production, at a supplier, because if you can smoothen that out, you can see where the favorable factors work for you and the don't. You can move ships on demand, if port congestion. So I'm curious, Robin, from a fashion side, obviously there's a lot more, and they all depend on some contract manufacturers. That visibility becomes, that flexibility becomes important.
Yeah, I think for fashion, absolutely that flexibility is important, but it even goes back to when it comes to planning and having a solution that allows you to run scenarios. That planning happens 12 months out, but then as you start to get closer to when fashion hits the stores, the way you're going to allocate and assort starts to really change. And so, it's almost in real time, right? You want to react to what the customer's buying. You want to react to where the trends are hot and not. And so that ability to, use any kind of predictive planning, the ability to run scenarios, and then be able to, make adjustments as to your production that's going to be happening within your categories, shift colors, shift styles, whatever the case may be, that's really important. And I think the more ability that these merchants have to be able to do all that, the less maneuvering they have to do when it actually hits the boat, right? Yep. So, they go hand in hand. There's no doubt about it. There's always something that comes up that's really hot that needs to hit, the boat quicker, and it needs to get here faster. But I think that ability to really run scenarios and be able to predict what might be happening with trends is really pivotal in making sure that the margin really is there, and again, of course, making sure that the customer experience really hits I think it also still, like you've mentioned sustainability, which we'll talk a little bit about, but we all know fashion is always a bit strained when it comes to sustainability, but it's really moved towards the forefront. And so, organizations are really taking a hard look at how they're producing and who is producing the goods, where is it coming from, can they shift if there becomes a problem? So being able to be connected to their providers or their manufacturers is really important. Do I need to move from Asia to South America? Those types of things happened during COVID and now are becoming very commonplace, right? So if there's something happening in another part of the world, that business can shift and still produce if it moves to another part of the globe, which is really important as well. And that hasn't really happened until recently in fashion. So,
and this is pre-COVID. I spoke to two chief supply chain officers, two leading fashion brands, and they both said it well. They said, "I don't know how you run. Could be fashion, could be hard lines, not grocery, but fashion, without an S&OP."
Right.
But not sure why my team knows that's important, but we can't work together.
Yeah.
It's not won't work together, it just can't. And it is a change. It's not about just, give them the best technology and it's going to work. There's got to be a mindset, but, there are leaders, executives that are recognizing that. It's just that somebody, it's got to be closed. Because
change is hard.
Change is hard. Absolutely.
Yeah, change is hard. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in these industries, there's so much reliance on contract manufacturing and being connected to your suppliers, and having that dialogue and ability to communicate back and forth around capacities or availability that makes it very complicated. So having a systematic way to do that and a process in place is very important. But change management is not just within your organization; it's also outside your organization, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Great. So now just kind of moving on to, planning is kind of the catalyst for just about every industry, one would think, right? But moving into logistics now, really wanted to touch on some topics around, what we're seeing in the logistics space. Robin, I think, you have some insights there that you wanted to discuss.
Yeah, I think from a logistics standpoint, when I'm thinking about really what's been a big shift in fashion is this whole notion of, buy online, pick up in store, curbside, return in store, this whole notion that, there are no channels. You get your item whenever you want them, right? We all fuss if we can't get something shipped within a day or two. What do you mean I have to wait a week? Those types of things. What do you mean it's not in stock, right? So from a logistics standpoint within fashion, it is immediate satisfaction. It is, usually an immediate need that needs to be fulfilled. And so this idea of, how do you get an item on somebody's doorstep within 2 hours, or how do you ensure that it's in the store? So from that perspective, logistics has really been, I would say it was a challenge, but now it's become a real opportunity because COVID, everybody put in that buy online, pick up in store and those types of things. So that was a great challenge that was overcome. But now there's a great opportunity of saying, okay, wait a minute. I probably don't have to have so many warehouses. So logistically, how can I fulfill from the store, ensure that, I'm shortening the time frame to the doorstep of an item, and really taking advantage of, these mini warehouses, if you will. We have a retailer out of Canada that does this really well. There is no warehouse. Everything goes right to the stores, and everything gets fulfilled from those stores. And so you can imagine if somebody's sitting I'm in St. Petersburg, Florida, and I order that item, they're going to find the closest store and ship it to me. And, they're going to send me every single moment during that process within that shipment. So I'm going to get an email that the order was received, and then it's on its way, and it's in transit, and what time it's going to be here. All those things are really important, and I know Profil has a lot of experience with last mile and this white glove service, which ironically enough, I just had a new bedroom set delivered. And, the retailer that I ordered from did a great job with that. And really that was the first with that, but fashion is adopting that. I want to know when my shoes are going to arrive. I want to know when the dress is going to be at the door. And the same white glove service that has been happening and really evolving in furniture and those types of retailers is really seeped over into fashion, just to ensure that people know when they're going to get an item. And I hate to say the last thing, and we see this on the news all the time, is you don't want your item picked up off the front step that's not you, right? So sure. It also reduces that opportunity for, unfortunately, theft and things like that. So if something's going to arrive, you can be there and you can pick it up off your doorstep. So yeah, I think that's it's a big challenge, but it's a huge opportunity that's starting to really come to fruition.
Yeah,
I think there's sorry,
Scott,
go ahead. No, I was just going to say, I said it's a differentiator because, every retailer, at least the ones that I work with, do view Amazon as a key competitor. And one of the things I tell them is what Amazon doesn't do is, and they will soon, I'm sure there's nothing that's not to be done, is they don't ask, when do you want it? They tell you when they will deliver it. This is for Prime. This is for next day. Between 8 in the morning and to Robin's point, it could show up when I'm out of the house. And so we, as we talk to retailers, this very simple vision that I see every retailer needs to achieve is, know your consumers very well. Know your consumers very intimate. What do they want? What's their behavior? What do they like? What do they dislike? What's their family like? What are their preferences? But then deliver products that they want, which is done on their terms, which means if I want it at between 1 and 2, I will dictate to you, you make it happen. Now, the easy answer is, well, they can't have to change every product. No, you don't, because, there are carriers that are, Uber has really kind of created this phenomenal network of carriers that are available on demand. If they don't want it, they don't take it, but there's a second person waiting out there to pick it up. So you can, when you can make that happen, that's where I will stick with the brand, because you're working with my convenience, not 1 day delivery. I might want it in 2 days. So then pick the order in 1.5 days. Don't pick it now, right? And logistics, to me, is where it happens, where the rubber meets the road. And, we've got, from a supply chain, from a demand side, there's one channel, right? It's the customer channel. It's whether you happen to be online or in the store. But from a supply chain, it's created more complexity, because now there are retailers that have, this one retailer just on the final mile, they spend over $1 billion a year on that, $1 billion, right? Wow. Just on, I'm not talking about inbound, outbound, because they have to find unique ways. And we have a number of partners. They have micro fulfillment centers. If you see some of these micro fulfillment centers, they sit in a parking lot. Think of any brand sitting in a parking lot of your local church. That becomes convenience, and they are fully automated. But from a supply chain, that's another drop-off point for me. That's another need for me to know what inventory is in that location, not in the store, but in that, So, but the point is, if supply chain can do this and they get the assistance with the ability for visibility and transparency, both inventory, where it is, in movement, in transit, consumers will love you for that. And at some point, that's how you'll create that dependency, that they know me, they want my business, they will service me when I want it. Because in some cases, in fashion, probably, in high luxury fashion, it's a little bit different because the brand sells itself. But if you're selling a tool or you're selling a shirt and a pant, you're selling a certain commodity item. And so you have to differentiate with service and convenience.
I mean, it's a real pivot in their total operating model, right? Everything from increasing the complexity of the logistics to their logistics spend, right? Going back to Robin's point on, with retailers, fulfilling out of stores, even within that, the change in management, your retail workers are no longer, just helping people check out, but now they've got to understand logistics and partial shipments and things like that. So there's a complete retraining and retooling of capabilities within the retail stores themselves. So it's a significant change that is, undertaking. Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think in that all that ties into, which I know we're going to talk about, but you can't talk about logistics without talking about sustainability, right? So the less that we have to put things on a truck, if we can combine items, if we can ship less, if we are able to follow where the product is being made all the way back to perhaps where the thread is in a fashion item. All those things when it comes to sustainability is really important, and delivering that green ledger, which, that's something that we're going to, we're able to do as well. So, I think, all of this all ties into, how our fashion brands specifically thinking about, how to be sustainable. So it all connects into one another. So the less that you have to ship something or put something on a plane or, at the last minute or those types of things, obviously, you're gonna save within your carbon footprint, and you can actually share that with your customer. So.
Yeah, and supply chain is probably the biggest contributor or influencer of carbon emission footprint, right? So, and we never, when I started supply chain, we never used the word sustainability, right? It was all about sustainable meant doing the same thing over and over again. But I would say if you make it most efficient, if you connect your supply chain, if you're collaborative about the supply chain, yes, you meet sustainable outcomes, but you do that profitably. It doesn't have to be, one is not mutually exclusive, right? If you plan ahead of time, you have less air shipments. If you can manage and optimize freight going out to the consumer or to a store, you optimize number of trucks on the road. And so it's really sustainable and profitable. And then from a compliance perspective, that connected supply chain, but a lot of people will ask, how responsible are your suppliers? Well, you have to ask the supplier, and guess what? The suppliers will say, we're very responsible. We have sustainable practices. But now all your records, all your production, your QA records, your ESG standard is digitized and is connected, visible. I have to report sustainability for compliance and regulation purposes. Now, if they're a true partner, all that's available, I can truly get how, what our ESG standards are. And so both from a reporting as well as just doing it for the good of the planet, it's natural, but it starts with everything being connected from demand to supply to execution.
Yeah, are there any particular trends or even, maybe emerging technologies you believe will, significantly impact, specifically the retail industry's ability around sustainability? You had mentioned some of this predictive, around shipment lead times.
Yeah, so the couple that come to mind, at least that I've been, and I try to talk about this with retailers. One is, consumers demanding sustainable. They want carbon neutrality. They want to reduce carbon footprint. There is a technology that is one of our partners, and they have gone in and said, here, customer, when you're checking out a product, we'll tell you how much carbon emission went into getting that pair of shoes or that drill bit. And we have prescribed a certain number of projects that are very earth-friendly, you save the trees, whatever the plastics, whatever the foundation is. If you truly believe in sustainability, make they do the calculation, $1.20 in addition to what you bought that shoe for. That way you can be contributing money to a good cause and know that you are buying carbon neutral products. So in essence, that technology has allowed that burden to shift to the consumer and say, truly we can provide, yes, there is carbon emissions in producing, bringing it to the store, bringing it to the consumer, but you have the opportunity to say, my order is carbon neutral. So I love that approach of putting it on the consumer, giving them the tool, and they can opt in. They don't have to, right? I mean, it's not like
Sure.
a compliance driven. The other one is just they have digitized so that all, I mentioned this a little bit, is all the quality, all the every supplier has a first pass and a second pass quality checks in their factory that you as a retailer will never ever see, right? And if that is available as a merchant, I can say, hey, it seems like there are more first time pass failures happening in this factory. I want to move it here. What you're doing is you're reducing product recalls. Product recalls is another big contributor to carbon emission, because you have to return that, and bring that product back. So there are there's many more that I've seen that really make it sustainable, but it's about efficiency as well.
Any thoughts, Robin?
Yeah, for the fashion industry, all the things that Praful's mentioned are also top of mind. But then there's some other things. The fashion industry is known for producing lots of samples. And so, we have a retailer, that's using digital printing. And, from the time that an item is in concept mode and then, is then approved, it can be then starting to produce within 48 hours because they're using digital printing, and they can take a look at that model of the item and approve it that quickly. So, and then of course we have another one that, the samples are, just one sample per style, right? So, as opposed to, believe it or not, if you've got a pair of, pants that are being produced and they're in 7 colors, fashion brands would then produce them that pant in every single color. So that reduction of that and making it digital, right? So taking the pictures and putting the swatches in a digital format so that, merchants can make decisions that way. Although it seems like one of those things where you might say, oh, well, that seems to make sense. Fashion is very, very much a look and feel. And so it's been hard to make that shift from a merchant's perspective to say, okay, I can make a decision with something in a digital format. And so we've come a long way with that. And so, I think you combine those things and you start to see that, there's a lot more efficiencies going on. There's even things where, there are some great brands out there that are getting into the repurposed part of the business. So they're taking an item and they're repurposing it. They're taking back items and reselling them. All of those things are not new, but we're seeing some very prominent brands out there that are starting to jump into that game and doing some great things with it, and really making a big difference. So I think from that perspective, that's a lot of what we're seeing. And then of course, that all connects within the supply chain. It all is part of what's going on logistically and planning and all those types of things. So,
and I think, Robin, you mentioned the color, right? Fewer colors. And your thinking as a merchant, could be waste, less waste, cost of the dye, right? Yeah. It's not good for the environment. But there are other benefits. In supply chain, they can have longer runs, right? Of fewer products. So it's amazing when you look at the business process. It's efficiency, but certainly we should be thinking about cost, efficiency, and sustainability, and they're not mutually exclusive.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, great. I think we've covered most of the topics. Just looking here, see if I've missed any. I think I've caught most of the questions. As I go through that. Yep, I think we've got just about everything here. So I think, as we wrap this up, I think this was a good dialogue. I think, obviously there's a lot of complexities. It's a intermingled web of complexities, to be honest with you. And it's not just applicable to this industry, but, really, especially in the sustainability, it's really, flowing into every industry, including, things like construction and, you name it. Really, there's going to be sustainability measures and requirements being driven government-wise, social responsible-wise. So it's definitely things that, I think that the fashion industry's led with that for many years now, at least 10 plus years. You kind of go back to many years ago when, a certain shoe manufacturer was very, very sustainable. But as we're looking at this now, consumer sentiment is driving a lot of the need for that. But we're going to see other industries fall into this as well, and I feel like this industry's got a leg up on it.
Definitely, yeah.
Well, I thank you guys for your time today, and appreciate the dialogue and some insights here. And I think this should wrap up our discussion for the day.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Looking forward to working with you guys.
Thanks, Robin.
Absolutely.
Right.
Thanks, Brockle.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.